you can recall last lesson, we talked about the American Constitution, some of the things it outlines for us and what we have to do to follow it. Well, the question I have to ask you today is how many constitutions do we actually live under? Is it just the American Constitution, or are there other constitutions? So for the first about 3 minutes of class, we're going to do a think, pair, share activity. We're going to take 1 minute to respond to that question and give a short explanation. You can write it down, you can think of it in your head. And then what you're going to do is take a minute and pair up with a partner, anybody sitting next to you, discuss it, see if you have similar answers, or if you have different answers, try to figure out the right one. And then we're going to take a couple minutes to share what you guys come up with in class, okay? So you can group up just with whoever you're sitting next to, but yeah, take 1 minute and answer, how many constitutions do we live under?
I don't know. We live under one constitution. Constitutions, but I don't know if he just means like, do we have local government constitutions? I don't think there's such a thing. I'll be able to put it in the worst searches that I'll take up some bus. Huh? My arm's getting tired. Do I need to do it so you can write? That's just gonna fall down. It's gonna be the shakiest video ever. I'm really bad at this.
All right, you guys had a chance to discuss it with the people around you. Anybody want to volunteer and share their thoughts? Cassidy?
We came up with, we live under a federal constitution, we live under the Pennsylvania Constitution, and we were wondering if there's like local constitutions as well.
Local constitution, we definitely live under a state constitution and federal constitution. Sometimes local municipalities or cities will have constitutions, but other times it's just going to be a code of laws. So for the sake of argument, I know we all come from different cities and different local municipalities, but we're going to say we live under two different constitutions. Now, there is a term, a type of government in which it's defined as two, yes?
Well, doesn't the federal constitution trump the state constitution?
Well, we're going to find that out today. Because in some cases it will, and in other cases it won't. So you can hold on to that thought, and we're actually going to see under what situations the U.S. Constitution does reign supreme, and what other circumstances the state constitution does. Okay? But there is, before Sandy raised her hand, there's a term for the type of government that has power separated among different factions. Does anybody know the name of that? I'll give you a hint. Before the American Constitution was drafted, there was another document that failed. Does anybody remember what it was called? Austin?
The
Articles of Confederation. And Austin, do you remember why that failed?
Because it gave the government no real power.
What government did it give no real power?
The federal government.
The federal government, no real power. So they still held true under the regular Constitution to this idea of federalism, which is what the term, what I was trying to get you guys to figure out was federalism. But instead of giving most of the power to the states, they gave some power to the federal government and some power to the states. Now, why would the forefathers who drafted the Constitution want to kind of create powers that are separated or delegated between two separate factions? Anybody have any idea? All right. Well, we will find that out through our next activity here. So I'm going to pass out a chart with some questions on it. And you can ignore the questions at the bottom at first. We're gonna get into those later. But what we're gonna do is go over some different kinds of laws and regulations, and we're gonna fill them into the appropriate chart. You're gonna see there's 3 columns: federal, state, local, and shared. And we're gonna work together to figure out which powers, which level of government hold. Yeah, I'm gonna take that.
You stop that? Making all that noise back there.
Tom, go ahead. Do you have a question or problem?
I'm just making all kinds of noise. I'm trying to do my work.
If you sat maybe up front a little further away from you, you'd be able to work a little better, or
You want me to sit there?
if that's up to you if you think you're getting too distracted.
Maybe she just stops what she's doing.
I think you could sit up here maybe a little
I don't see
farther
why
away.
she's doing. Wow.
Okay. So, the first type of law regulation we're going to discuss is bankruptcy laws. Under which column would you put bankruptcy laws? Jared.
Federal?
That is correct. You want to come up here and write it on the board for me? ECY.
You said the other one.
Thank you. What about healthcare? Anybody have any idea what section healthcare would be placed under? Cassie?
Federal.
Actually, I think you're thinking of Medicare. Medicare is completely a federal run program, but healthcare is technically shared. If you want to come up and write it under
Me to do it?
shared. Thank you. And the reason it's shared is because Medicaid is actually run through the federal and the state government. What happens is under Medicaid is the federal government will give grants to states, and then they are really decide who receives that funding. So it's kind of separate for every state. We also have tax policy. Where would we put tax policy on this chart?
Shared state taxes and.
That would be shared. Do you want to come up and put that on the chart for us? CJ? What about zoning? Does everybody know what I mean when I say zoning? All right. There's actually 3 types of zones. There are residential, industrial, and commercial, and it's up to the government to decide a specific area of land, how that is going to be zoned. So, say there's an open field and a developer wants to develop it. If there's a law saying that no industry can be built there, they have to either develop it economically, or not economically, commercially or residentially. So that is what we mean by zoning. So you set up different zones in an area as to where industry can go, where commerce can go, and where residential neighborhoods can go. So does anybody have any idea where zoning would fall on this chart?
State.
It would be state. Do you want to come up here and fill it in for us?
I thought the community zoning boards decided.
You were actually right. Let's change this to state/local. because for the most part, actually, local governments will decide that, but there also is some maybe some state laws or regulations that might prevent a certain area from being developed a certain way. So it is really shared power between state and local government. All right, the next topic here is immigration. Anybody have any idea where immigration would fall on this chart? Austin?
Federal?
It would be under federal. Do you want to come up and write it for us?
Yep.
What about the regulation of public morals? What I mean by that is gambling laws, maybe alcohol and tobacco regulations. Where would that fall? Jared?
State?
It would fall under state law. Do you want to come up and write it on the board again, please? Thank you.
My grandma just loves to go to the casino. Just loves it.
Public morals.
See, there goes that blabbermouth.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for the discussion, but if you could please raise your hand before you just talk out in class, it'd be appreciated. Thank you. All right, we're going to do 3 more here. What about national defense? Where does that fall under? Who has the power to defend the nation? Austin?
Wouldn't that be shared?
That, I would put that under the federal government. Why would you think that would be shared?
The Second Amendment.
Um,
We all have our own duty.
To an extent, that is true. However, these militias, or so-called militias, or individuals with guns who keep them to protect themselves from tyranny, are not regulated under the state or local governments. If you think about it, the Second Amendment is under the American Constitution, so that technically would regulate the militias and also the National Army or military. That is also strictly under federal law and regulation. Do you want to come fill it out on the board, please?
Yep.
Don't you have to get it right in every state to carry a concealed weapon?
That is true, but carrying a concealed weapon is a little different from national defense. That's more of a personal defense issue.
It'd be in national defense.
What if it was the president?
It's a really good one here. No, I would still say that's a personal defense issue. I think maybe under an extreme circumstance it might become a national defense issue, but for the most part, I don't think somebody carrying a single handgun is going to be defending the nation by themselves or under any sort of organization that's on the state level to organize a military faction and defend themselves. So, all right, let's get 2 more up here. What about motor vehicle registration? Where does that fall under? Megan?
State.
It does fall under state. Do you want to come up and look at it on the board? Thank you.
What is it?
It is vehicle registration or motor vehicle registration. All right, and the last one. Where are environmental regulations carried out? Environmental regulations. Yes.
Shared?
It is shared. You want to please write that on the board?
What was it?
Environmental regulations. Okay. Now, we could probably go on for hours filling out this entire chart, but I think we're going to stop here because we have a good idea of the kind of laws that the federal government deals with and that state and local government deals with. Before we get to the questions on the worksheet I handed out to you, you guys see, maybe make any judgments as to, just by looking at this chart, when the national government might be in charge or when the state and local governments might be in charge? And there's really no wrong answers here. We're just kind of trying to figure out maybe some common themes among the different levels of government. Wait, well, let me ask you this. Why wouldn't zoning be taken care of at the federal level? Why is that a local issue? Cassie?
Because there's so much land in the United States that it's easier to break it down into the states to handle because the federal government already does so much.
That is a very good point. That's exactly what I was thinking. Now, why is that different from something like immigration? Because there's a lot of states that are border states with Canada or Mexico, but that is completely handled at the federal level. So why doesn't the federal government give the states the right to deal with immigration as they want? TJ?
Because they want to have the rules be like uniform.
They do want the rules to be uniform. Any idea as to why?
I guess because otherwise you could have like, I don't know, one state that has no restrictions whatsoever and so anybody could just come in, and then another one that's really tough and people could just come in through the state that it's really easy to get in and then go wherever they want.
That is exactly what I was thinking. Very good. What about some of these shared aspects here? Why would something like environmental regulations be carried out at all levels of government? Well, it kind of goes along with what TJ said. There's a kind of a uniform underlying law at the federal level that puts in place environmental regulations. Lacey?
Are we working on these questions right now?
No, we're going to get to those. Sorry. All right, back to environmental regulations. As I was saying, the federal government kind of lays out a broad list of regulations that states sort of follow. But why would some states maybe, or some local municipalities, want to enforce stricter environmental standards?
Because certain states like have certain resources.
That's true. So maybe, for example, West Virginia, what kind of resource are they known for? Coal. Is burning coal good for the environment? No. So maybe their laws might be more strict than, say, California. Or, I'm sorry, their laws would be more lax than California because they rely heavily on coal industry to provide jobs where, other states might have better regulations done. Okay, so there's 3 questions at the bottom of your worksheet here, which just kind of goes along with what we're trying to figure out in the discussion we just had. If you want to take maybe about 5 minutes to answer those, I'll be around to make it clear if any questions or anything, and then we are going to discuss the answers and hopefully get a better understanding of when the federal government makes laws and then when the state and local government makes laws, okay? Any questions? You guys could work with people sitting next to you quietly if you're maybe having trouble with a certain question. Let me know. Governments have the authority to create as you can see, taxes are shares because of the state questions. Megan, everything going good over here?
Yep, awesome.
Everything going good? Anybody need more time? Good. All right. First question. Any volunteers to share their answers with the class? Caleb, would you like to share your
Yeah,
answer with
sure.
the class, please?
Why do all levels in the government have the authority to create and implement tax policy? I said each and every area and bureaucratic agency of the government has different needs and ideologies. Therefore, they may need different taxes than other agencies would have to, so all levels of government should have the ability to regulate the tax policy just because they're going to have different needs and, but once again, ideologies. So some may want to tax certain areas, whereas other places may not want to tax certain areas. For instance, if you're in a certain area that has something along the lines of, let's say you're looking at like the coal industry or something, well obviously you're going to want to tax that certain industry in only West Virginia. You're not going to want to try to impose a coal tax in, well, let's say like Ashtabula, Ohio or something, an area that doesn't have.
That's
like
a
the
very
gift
good
cards or
answer.
something.
That was a
I
great
just
answer.
said they needed money. Said all that.
Tom, would you like to answer the second question for us, please?
Yeah. Why does state and local governments need, what do they got? Govern public rules, not the federal government? I said there's too many people and they don't have enough, like the president can't go out there and enforce everything, right?
That is part of it, actually. Maybe there's too many different regions for the federal government to create one uniform law or regulation on public morals. But I think there's a little bit more to that. Anybody else want to share their answer? Jared?
It's state income, so states should be able to control it.
Now, why do you think states should be able to control it? Why would states, maybe like Nevada, have different ideas on morals than a state like Texas? What city is in Nevada?
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas. So what would happen if a federal law came down imposing stricter public moral regulations on all states? If you were in Las Vegas, well, what sort of ramifications would that have?
Become a ghost town.
Pretty much, essentially, I think a lot of business would have to leave. So I think that's why it's shared, is because not one area, or actually not all areas, have the same ideology when it comes to public morals. Places like Nevada or Las Vegas might be very lax on public morals, or places like Texas might have strict public morals. So it's kind of left up to the discretion of state and local governments to determine kind of laws they're going to put in place there. All right, last question. Any volunteers to read that one? Elizabeth.
Because the government is really doesn't like Mexico, and they think that Canada is going to invade us, so they're really scared, and so they do all these crazy things because Mexico and Canada.
I actually think a dislike towards Mexico might have something to do with it, but that is not quite the answer I was looking for. Does anybody else want to volunteer?
Kind of like with the environmental thing, it needs to be uniform. We can't have like Texas declaring war on France while Maine tries to have a treaty with them. It needs to be like the whole country has to have the same policy.
That is a very good answer. So I think we can kind of come to a conclusion on what kind of laws the federal government regulates and what kind of laws the state and local government regulates. TJ, when you were discussing immigration earlier, you said that the laws needed to be, I think you said universal, right? So any laws that are universal are going to fall under which category? The federal. So any laws that are universal and maybe if they were different among states, might cause problems, such as immigration or national defense. Those are going to be listed under federal laws and federal regulations. When it comes to state and local, what kind of laws are imposed at this level? I think the best example would be public morals. Jared, you discussed public morals, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so what along with public morals and maybe zoning, what makes those needed to be regulated at the state and local level? Idea that all regions are different, okay? And so maybe leaving up to the discretion of different regions in these laws that don't have to be universal, that if they are, if they do differ from state to state or from municipality to municipality, things aren't going to go crazy like with immigration. And for the shared powers, what sort of conclusion can we reach there? I see, in terms of environmental regulations, let's say, the government, the federal government, creates a policy, but why would the state and local governments want to expand on that? Austin?
Just because all the state and local governments are a little bit different.
Yeah. So this shared for shared powers, it kind of has both federal and state local examples in it. So obviously you can't just leave up environmental regulations to just the states, because then maybe some areas might have no environmental regulations, and that's going to implicate or have implications for regions other than that. So that's why for shared powers, the federal government kind of sets the bar, and then that allows room for state and local governments to kind of build upon that and shape it to the way they like. All right. So now we're just going to have kind of a quick discussion here of some hypothetical questions that I'm going to pose to you. Imagine the governor of Texas signs a law that outlaws any foreign immigration into the state. And now imagine that law landed on the desk of the United States Supreme Court. Do you think that law would be unconstitutional, or would overturning the law infringe upon state and local rights? Any ideas? Cassie?
I think that if they overturned it, it would technically infringe on state and local rights, but because the federal Constitution is more powerful, and it has, I mean, if they say something, then everyone has to follow it. I think technically the federal government would have the power to do that.
I agree. The federal government would have the power to do that. And immigration is completely a national issue. So you might feel that it might infringe upon state and local rights, but I think under the government and where these powers are delegated, I think technically that it doesn't overturning the law would not infringe upon any state or local rights. All right, and one more kind of hypothetical question here. Say the federal government passes a law that greatly restricts kind of public morals, maybe due to alcohol or gambling, and states decided not to follow that. What do you think would happen if states decided not to follow a hypothetical law imposing strict regulations on public morals at the federal level?
Their funding would be different. With the highways, I think it was in the 50s, right? When they started building the highways, like, people had to enforce laws or else they wouldn't get funding.
That might happen, and I could see where you would think that, but I think if the state or municipality wasn't happy with that public moral law imposed upon them, I think they would have the right to kind of disregard the law. And I think if that landed, Austin.
I was just gonna say, I thought when the federal government enforced the 21-year-old drinking law.
It did, but that's kind of an anomaly, because that might be the one thing that's ruled under the federal power. But you ever hear of dry counties?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
It means there's no alcohol for sale in the county.
Right. So that's kind of left up to the state or local government, right? Yeah, so, and I think that the 21-year-old law was only passed, several years ago. It actually used to be 18 in New York now. So there is some, there are obviously some leeway here. Not everything is cut black and dry, which kind of the way it is in American federalism, but that's a very good point. But for the most part, I think public morals are run at the state level. All right, well, that's going to be it for the discussion today. For your homework is just a one-page paper where you are going to outline American federalism. Remember the kind of points we made about which laws and regulations are decided at which level, and you just have to give one example of each law and regulation at that level.